So before we get into the social welfare programs, we're going to take a look at the wealth distribution in the United States so we can get some idea of why there is such a need for these programs to exist. All right, so to start with, we're going to use a term called median income. I know you guys are familiar with all the math stuff here, but when we talk about median income, we're talking about the income that is in the exact middle. If we lined up all the people from the lowest income to the highest income, we want to find the one in the middle, take that income, half the people in the country make less than that, and half the people in the country make more than that. Average income would just take all the incomes and divide per person. And we're going to look at why average income is a bad way to measure this. But median income has risen from the very distant past, but in recent decades, it has been pretty stagnant. And you can see that in the chart here. Like median income has grown from 1970, which is 50 years ago, but it has barely grown from the year 2000. Now, this is a bad sign because, on the other hand, average income has grown a lot, and we'll talk about what's going on there. So, median income is stable. You can see on the chart on the left, median income is that purple line. Average income can rise without the median income rising, because the income growth that is taking place at the top of the income distribution. So what we mean here is that the incomes of the very, very wealthy are rising, and they're rising by a lot. But that is not changing what that middle income is. So while the median income stays stagnant, all of the increased wealth in the country tends to be going to those people with already incredibly wealthy incomes. And so this is why we say that the rich are getting richer. And it's not really true that the poor are getting poorer, but everyone else is relatively poor compared to what's happening with the richest populations here. So when we talk about income distribution, we're trying to figure out, who makes what amounts of money here. And it's really important for us to have an idea of just how wealthy the wealthiest Americans are. So when we talk about the top 1% in this country, we're talking about people that are earning $370,000 in income. That means they're getting $370,000 per year. This is a lot, especially when we were looking at median income. Over there was less than a quarter of this. So when we talk about the top 1%, this is a whole lot of income. When we talk about the top 10%, we're talking about people that earn $110,000 in income. Among that top 1%, we have a whole lot of stratification as well. So we have the top 1% of the top 1%. These are people who are bringing in $9 million of income per year. So this is the top 0.01% of the country. So there's a tremendous amount of income going to a very tiny, tiny group of people, and very, very small amounts of income being distributed among everyone else. Wealth distribution in the country is even more unequal because those income gaps are compounded not only over time, but over generations. So the top 10% of wealthy Americans here overwhelmingly own more wealth than all of the other 90% of Americans combined. In fact, you can see here, this is one of the charts from our book. The bottom half of Americans have almost no collective wealth. The bottom 40% would own the red dot on this map. And so we have a whole lot, like about half the country that controls almost no wealth, while we have a tremendous amount of wealth concentrated in the hands of the top 10%. And what makes this worse is that Americans don't even understand this problem. Americans don't really comprehend how uneven the income and wealth distribution is in the country. So we can see on the chart here, they split all of the earners into what are called quintiles. So you have the top 20%, the bottom 20%, the second, third, and fourth. And the top collection of colors there shows us the percentages of the actual wealth distribution in the country. And the bottom shows us what people think it should be, but the middle shows us what people think it is. And the sad thing here is that the actual distribution is much, much, much worse than what Americans think it is, and is nowhere close to what Americans think it ought to be. People really underestimate how much money the wealthy people have in the country, and at the same time, they overestimate by a lot how much money the poor people have in this country. And this is made worse by a problem called relative deprivation, which means that people tend to feel that they are poorer, especially when the people around them have more material wealth or whatever. So people tend to think of themselves in like poorer distribution groups and all of that. So here's just another visualization of the wealth distribution in the United States. You can kind of see there the bottom 70% of all earners have only 7% of all of the wealth in the country. So the wealth in this country is increasingly concentrated at the top, especially there among the 1%. No other country on the earth that we would compare ourselves to, no country with a modern economy, with an industrialized country, has wider extremes of inequality than the United States does. The top 5% of wealthy families in the United States own 3/4 of all of the wealth in the country. And here's just another way to look at that. We have the top 1% of the country with 43% of all the wealth, the top 5% of the country ending up with 72% of all the wealth. The bottom 80%, only 7% of all the wealth in the country here. So in the United States, there's a lot less social mobility than in any other established democracies. In the United States, we have a lot less of what we call a safety net of programs. We're going to go through some of these programs, but they're not very big and they don't help very many people here. In the United States, we have way lower taxes than other countries here, and we have way, way less programs that are designed to help people and way less programs that redistribute the resources more equally by taking, a greater percentage from those wealthy families and distributing very minimal benefits to the poorer families here. The other thing here in this country is that the rich have greater ability to influence policy. We have, thanks to our Supreme Court, we have no limit on the amount of money that rich people can spend on campaigns. And so, in the last couple of years, we've seen wealthy billionaires run campaigns on their own, from Donald Trump to Michael Bloomberg. And it's basically a very uneven political playing field as well. We mentioned that there was less social mobility in the United States, meaning that it is much, much harder here, even though this is the American myth story here that people can go from rags to riches. There is way less social mobility in the United States than there is in any similar country. It is highly unlikely that people that are born into the bottom of the wealth distribution make it near the top at all. In fact, this chart shows us those same quintiles here, and people that are born into the bottom quintile of the wealth distribution, almost half of those people remain in the bottom quintile as they grow up. You see a very, very tiny percent, 4% of people born into the bottom 20% of incomes in this country. Only 4% make it into the top 20% of income distribution in this country. On the other hand, it is very, very easy for those born at the top of the wealth distribution to stay that way. You basically see the reverse trend over there. While it is possible to be born rich and to blow it all, you see that almost half of those people born into the top quintile stay there. They remain in that top quintile, and 63% of them stay in the top 40%. So we've seen this a bunch of different ways here, that the incomes at the top are growing. The other incomes are remaining pretty stagnant. And what that really means is that there's less people in the middle class. There are a lot less opportunities for people in the middle class now. Especially people without college education do not have a lot of opportunity to earn middle class incomes. Like that was not true decades ago, where there were plenty of great economic opportunities for people even without college degrees. Like they work in factories that paid people well and things like that. But when we start to combine some factors like moving jobs, particularly like factory jobs overseas and automation and things like that, there are a lot less opportunities for people to earn middle class incomes. So the middle class is shrinking, and the middle class's share of the income is shrinking. And rich people's income and rich people's share of the national income is growing. So we see in the chart here where the middle class used to control 60% of the income. That is now lower than the income controlled by the upper income groups, while the lowest group has stayed the same. So we have, basically the low income families staying the same, the middle income families losing their share of the economy, and the upper income families gaining a tremendous share of the economy. All right, so how do we deal with this? We have two main types of programs here, and we're going to talk about the difference between these. We have means-tested programs, and we have entitlement programs. What we see here is we have a Medicare enrollment form, and so this is going to give us an example of an entitlement program. All right, first we have entitlement programs. This Social Security is our obvious example of this here. An entitlement program is a program where the government has promised a benefit to a population, but they can't control the amount spent here. Basically, you can't control the size of the population, or you can't control the amount that gets spent. So, with Social Security, we promise income to old people, and we can't control the size of the population of old people. Similarly with Medicare, like if we are going to pay health insurance for old people, we can't really control, especially think about a year like this where like all of a sudden there's a new disease that like gets a lot of people sick. We can't control how much healthcare is going to cost. So the thing to think about here, the book describes it as X benefits are guaranteed to Y recipients, but we really can't control how many people Y is. So programs like Social Security or veterans benefits or things like that, we don't really get to control the populations. But these programs tend to be popular because everybody can get them, right? These are open to everyone. Means-tested programs, on the other hand, these provide benefits to individuals who only qualify because they have some kind of specific need. So this is like these are people that like meet certain income requirements or something like that. So this is a controllable expense. The government gets to decide how much money it's going to spend on these programs. Now, entitlement programs are popular because everyone gets them. These programs are controversial because it tends to be a small group of people that get them and other people pay for them with their taxes. So these are controversial and not as popular, mostly because people don't like the idea of being taxed in order to give benefits to people living in poverty. And this is a lot, that goes back a lot to people's perception of what causes poverty. All right, so next up, we're going to go through the different social welfare programs that the United States uses to try to fix some of the problems with that income distribution here in the United States.